Okay, and now we are live. So, welcome to Module 3 Law Enforcement Agencies. Let's look at the objectives for this meeting. We want to identify chapters 4, 5, and 6, readings and resources. We'll discuss the Module 3 Community Presentation Outline Assignment. And I will introduce you to the Module 3 live classroom question. Let's turn our attention for a minute to readings and resources. On this one, it does say, this is what you see inside your course. It does say chapters 4 and 6. However, I added another chapter because it relates to directly what we're going to be discussing. Another resource you might like is one that's provided by the Rasmussen University Online Library. In just a minute, I'll show that to you. And then I've also gathered 3 other resources: a self-assessment checklist, a template outline, and a video. So let's look at what does a good outline look like. This is a screen capture of the page provided by Rasmussen University. Now, when we go here, you will see 3 different types of outlines. For our assignment, I ask you to use either outline with main ideas, subtopics, subdivisions, and details, or a full sentence outline. Why? That will help me understand what you're trying to say. So let's go look. Hi, Courtney. We're on this slide, so we're going to keep going. I just introduced our session and the objectives. We're going to go up online and look at this page. Okay, we're at the Rasmussen University Online Library. What does a good outline look like? If we scroll down, we're going to find 3 different ways. The first way is using alphanumeric. This may not provide enough information for me to understand what you're saying, so please do not use the alphanumeric outline. Continuing down the page, here's one you might want to use: outline with main ideas, subtopics, subdivisions, and details. And you will see an example. Coming down to the 3rd type of outline, we have a full sentence outline. I ask you to either use main ideas, subtopics, subdivisions, and details, or a full sentence outline. The more information you provide, the better I'll be able to understand what you're trying to deliver. At the very bottom of this, you'll see an outline template as well as a video. If you've never created an outline in Microsoft Word, I encourage you to watch this. Let's go back to our PowerPoint. Now we're back in our PowerPoint. We have a set of instructions. I encourage you to always listen to him. Also read the information here. You can see the 3 areas you will be addressing in your outline. And there's also a little reminder right there. Outline with main ideas, subtopics, subdivisions, and details, or use the full sentence outline. When in doubt, I encourage you to provide more information. You can do that by using the full sentence outline. I encourage you to listen to this. It takes about 1 minute, so we're going to go ahead and listen. Trying to get it so you can see it. There. Let's try this one. Can you see the listen? Hopefully you can. It only takes a minute to listen to it.
Welcome back. Today we're diving into a task that's both exciting and vital for community engagement. As a law enforcement officer for your local police department, you've been asked to give a presentation to the community. Your mission? Explain the historical development of law enforcement and educate the community about the different law enforcement levels: local, state, and federal. Your chief of police wants an outline for your community presentation. You're the expert, and it's your chance to shine. Let's start with the historical development of law enforcement. Begin your presentation by taking the community on a journey through time. Highlight key milestones in the historical development of law enforcement. This could include the evolution of policing strategies, the establishment of formal police departments, and significant moments that shaped law enforcement's role in society. Now, let's tackle the different law enforcement levels: local, state, and federal. Break it down for the community so they understand who's responsible for what and how these levels work together. As you create your outline, think about how to engage the community. Consider incorporating visuals, real-life examples, or even guest speakers to enhance the learning experience.
Okay, we're going to go back to our PowerPoint. And now you should be able to see it. Please review grading rubric. To help you complete your assignment, I'm offering you some different handouts. The first one is the self-assessment checklist. Anytime you see this icon, you know you'll find a copy of the handout in the course announcements. But don't tell me, show me. So let's click here. And go online. It has different parts to it. We're starting with the history of law enforcement. Take this sheet out. I'll be delivering it in 2 formats, a Word and a PDF file. You can click inside the Word and mark it yes if you met this requirement. If not, mark it needs work. This is a self-assessment. After you've reviewed your presentation, the goal is for every item to be marked yes. If you see some marked needs work, I encourage you to continue to work. But this breaks it down as to what you should see for each section. For example, history of law enforcement in the U.S. Did you begin with the early systems? Did you include at least 2 to 3 key milestones? Did you explain how law enforcement evolved in response to social changes? Our next section, differences between state between local, state, and federal agencies. You can see the 3 items you should include in that section. The next one is local law enforcement. Make sure you include these points. Going down to state law, we need to make sure we've addressed these 2. And then finally down to federal law enforcement. This is a 3-page handout. We're now on page 3. Your professional language and writing quality. Double check yourself. Make sure all these items are present. And finally, do a final check. We're using our book, APA 7th edition formatting, and you followed all assignments carefully. This one, APA 7th edition formatting. If you looked inside our course shell, you will discover that no formal writing style is used. However, I encourage you to always use APA 7th edition formatting. No matter what writing style you use, all sources you have used to create your outline should be referenced in the reference section, and I should see citations inside the outline. Let's go back to our PowerPoint. Here's another outline you'll see. Tips for addressing Module 3 Community Presentation Outline. You can see the areas that will be covered, and we can go here to access it. This handout will include some tips. These are only tips. The way you structure your outline is up to you, providing you have met all the requirements. I was just doing a little bit of brainstorming to help you get started. So hopefully this handout will work. And there. And this will be inside the course announcements. Let's go back to our PowerPoint. We can use a template outline. This copy is in the Rasmussen University online library site, the page we visited early, and I also placed a copy in a course announcement. Let's look at it for a minute. Here's the outline. It gives you a little general idea of how to structure it. This next page is the very important page. Delete everything in red before submitting your outline. So I encourage you to read this section. It's all in red. It's at the bottom of your template. Let's go to our PowerPoint. And now we're back. This is the video that's at the bottom of the Rasmussen University, the page I will include in this presentation. So if you've never created an outline in Word, perhaps this short video will help you. Now let's look a little bit deeper and let's look at some history. The first one, history of the American police officer. You can see the source that I used to obtain this information from. We're going to click and go online. This is the link to a brief history of law enforcement. If we scroll down, you can see that you may find information that you like. Okay, and we're going to go back to the PowerPoint. The next source that you might like is Honoring the Fallen. We can go up here, and I'll share this page with you. We just scroll down, you can see the different dates. So hopefully this will help you. Remember, I'm only providing some resources. You're always encouraged to use other resources. If you find something extremely useful, please share it with your colleagues. Let's go back to the PowerPoint. The next thing I want to show you is a video, The Origins of Policing in America.
I think there's a lot of people who say, yeah, I know the police are broken. Let's just enact the reforms that will fix it. But the question for me is, if the police are broken, when did they break? What year in American history did the police break? It seems really trite to say if you don't study history, you're doomed to repeat it. But nothing illustrates that more than the history of policing.
Policing, in one form or another, has existed since colonial days. In the form of night watches, local sheriffs, and militias. But it wasn't until the 19th century that northern cities such as Boston created modern police departments as we would recognize them today. These northern departments were not the first example of a uniformed, publicly funded law enforcement institution in America.
By the time the northern colonies were afoot in the 17th century, the idea of keeping track of the most valuable asset in the United States, that is, enslaved Africans, animated much of what we recognize today as law enforcement.
In the 1700s, the South saw the rise of official, salaried slave patrols, whose task was to capture, control, and brutalize enslaved people.
The initial acts that empower slave patrols and militias were acts that basically empowered all white people to surveil and punish all black people.
These slave patrols were required to serve a tour of duty, usually up to a year. Individuals were compensated for their time, but they were also penalized if they did not show up for their required service.
All white people, including white children, were expected to enforce so-called slave codes. These laws were meant to prevent enslaved people from organizing or rebelling. It was against the law, for example, for enslaved people to leave their plantations, gather without a white person present, learn to read or write, or even defend themselves if attacked by a white person. After the Civil War, the 13th Amendment to the Constitution abolished slavery except as a punishment for a crime.
The South immediately moves to exploit this loophole by passing a series of crime bills known as Black Codes, which essentially criminalize all forms of Black freedom. They criminalize unemployment by adopting these very broad vagrancy laws that essentially criminalize any Black person who can't prove that they're working. Any African American who challenges the terms of work, barters or brokers for a better deal, turns down a terrible offer, walks away from an abusive employer or a relationship with a landowner, by definition becomes a vagrant and by definition becomes a criminal. They could then be sold at sheriff's auction back to the very person who had just claimed that they were a criminal by virtue of not accepting a fair labor deal.
This practice of convict leasing earned enormous revenues for the states who lent out their prisoners, and huge profits for the companies using this prison labor in mining, railroads, and other industries. The new laws effectively re-enslaved those who had just gained their freedom and required new police to take over the former duties of the slave patrols.
When you have Black people serving in political offices for the first time, when you have Black landowners in abundance, when you have Black professionals, there are Reconstruction era judges, the stakes are even higher for this everyday performance of Black subservience to white domination. It is the police who will ultimately serve that function of reminding Black people, in many cases, their lower status in society.
What we see is that that general way of thinking about race and thinking about disorderly people never really changes. It's kind of woven into the DNA. But it's not just because individual police officers are racist, it's because the institution was literally created to make sure that wealthy and powerful people could extract labor.
Early police departments in the North had a similar goal to control labor and were notoriously corrupt.
The police functioned as an expression of political elites and powerful, affluent people who essentially wanted poor people to stay in their segregated slum communities. Police often functioned as enforcers of political machines, functioned one step removed from gangs.
Police often worked in the service of business owners who were faced with growing unrest among their labor forces in the wake of mass European immigration and rapid industrialization.
One of the best examples of this is the Pennsylvania State Police. The institutions that precede the Pennsylvania State Police are actually private police forces which are owned by people who are running coal mines. And their job is explicitly to control the workers who are trying to unionize for rights.
The story of policing in the United States is the story of systems meant to protect and serve only a fraction of Americans. It is this history that many of today's activists point to when calling for the defunding or even the abolishment of police.
The cops not protecting us, we gotta protect us.
The ability to police crime or inequality or poverty or races or whatever was the social problem to be solved by law enforcement was always an act of political power and discretion. And it just so happens that African Americans have stood in that position for the longest of any other population.
What the history does is it allows us to decouple the idea of public safety from the idea of police. What actually protects women from rape and from sexual assault, right? What actually stops people in communities, both Black and white, from killing each other? What kinds of things actually help people who are mentally ill? Are those things police? And I think very quickly, once you reflect on that, you realize the answer is no. We have to stop saying police are broken. We have to say police are working, and we need to create another institution to do public safety.
Okay, moving on. The history of law enforcement in the United States. These are some tips that you might consider adding to your outline. I like the part where it says use timelines or visual aids. Pictures say 1,000 words. I encourage you to include visual aids in your outline. Now, what is the difference between the federal, state, and local law enforcement? First, we'll look at the local law enforcement. These are just some ideas for you to include in your outline. The next one is state law enforcement agencies. Some ideas. Now keep in mind, after this live session, I do put a copy of this PowerPoint as a PDF file in your course announcement. You will also see links to all the items I'm sharing with you. And finally, we'll move on to the federal law enforcement agencies. Some things you might consider adding to your outline. Now, many of you are considering about entering the criminal justice system. And some might be thinking about being a police officer. I'd like to share this information with you. It's the Occupational Outlook Handbook. And you can see the median pay for a police officer, number of people they'll need. Also going across, you can see what they do, the work environment, how to become one, pay structure, job outlook, state and area data, and similar occupations. I hope that information helps you. Next, we're going to look at the Module 3 live classroom question. In case you're having problems reading that, I'm going to share another page with you. Okay, so here's the question. What are the key differences in jurisdiction and responsibilities between local, state, and federal law enforcement agencies? And why is it important for communities to understand these differences? So that's the Module 3 live classroom question. When you're prepared to answer that question, please provide at least one college paragraph. And you see the rule of thumb, 5 to 8 sentences, 100 to 200 words, and continue on down. Looking at the tips, please share your answer in the Module 3 live classroom. That will be worth 5 points. And you're always encouraged to share your thoughts with your colleagues. Question serves a couple purposes. First, it helps you gain 5 points. And second, you should see a strong similarity or relationship between the live classroom question and the outline you're putting together. So I hope by participating in this question will help you complete your assignment. Okay, and now we're back into the main PowerPoint. Let's summarize what we've talked about. I encourage you to read chapters 4, 5, and 6, readings and resources. I've shared some resources with you, and I hope those help you complete your outline. I also asked you to provide one of 2 possible outlines. Next, we discussed the Module 3 Community Presentation Outline Assignment. I've offered you some links to outside resources. We know we don't have to use those, and if you find something different, please share it. And finally, I introduced you to the Module 3 live classroom question. But at this point, I would ask you if you have any questions. Not sure if anybody does. Let's see. You can unmute yourself. You can type in chat. Oh, here comes the chat. No questions. No questions. Okay, great. If you do, you know my number. You know how to contact the messenger and also call me if you need my help. I truly appreciate your questions. So at this time, I would like to thank you for attending this live classroom session. I wish you success in creating your outline. Thank you, everybody. And we'll go ahead and end this for now. Make sure I've answered all questions. Yep. But you have a nice day. Thank you.